Okay, today in IM2 we're going to graph the whole thing this time. So now we have the ax squared plus the bx plus the c. Yay! Okay, so here's just showing you how to graph. We're going to go through all these concepts and find all these different things. So this is just giving you a lot of the information in one place. This is in both your journal and your textbook. Okay, so the vertical line that divides a parabola into two symmetrical halves is the axis of symmetry. We've talked about that before. The axis of symmetry always passes through the vertex. So we're going to talk about what if we had a vertex of 2, 3. That one means that our axis of symmetry would equal 2 because it's always the x of the vertex. Now they're telling us you can use the zeros to find the axis of symmetry. So how would you do that? Well, remember that both of the zeros are going to be equidistant from our axis of symmetry, which means I could find the average of the two zeros, and that will give me my axis of symmetry. So if I had zeros of -4 and 6, I would divide that by 2. I'd get 2 over 2, and my axis of symmetry is 1. So how far is 1 from 6? It's 5. How far is 1 from -4? It's 5. So that's a quick way to check, but that would be my axis of symmetry if these were my zeros. Okay? How would you write it? Always as a line. Okay, so finding the axis of symmetry by using zeros. If you have 1 0, meaning that your graph only touches the x-axis in one place, then the axis of symmetry is equal to that. Okay? You don't need to think about it. You have 1 0, the 0 is the point on the vertex, so you're good to go. If you have 2 zeros, you can do what I just showed you, and that is find the average. Okay, so now we're going to find the axis of symmetry using the zeros. So this is practice. So if we only have 1 0, what's our axis of symmetry? It's x equals -1. Okay, remember, if you have 1 0, then it's also your vertex. Okay, and that means that gives you your axis of symmetry. Okay, now we have 2 zeros. So we're going to go 1 plus 4 divided by 2. 5 over 2 is 2.5. And that should be our axis of symmetry. And there you go. Okay? And here's another one. Here's another. So we're going to go -2 plus 4. You got to watch out with your negatives. Divided by 2. That's 2 divided by 2. And we've seen this one before. And the axis of symmetry is 1. Everybody good? Okay. Okay, so how would you find the axis of symmetry if all you have is the equation? Well, here's the magic formula. And we use ax squared plus bx plus c. We have a negative here. We put the b on top in the numerator, and then we go 2 times a. So let's do an example because I want you to remember something that's very critical. So this is just any kind of problem. I'm going to go negative, put your 3 on top, and then when you plug in the a, don't forget the negative. So it becomes -3 over -4, and my axis of symmetry is 3/4. Do not ever leave it like this with negative, because I don't know if you understand that that's a positive number. So always cancel your negatives and give me the complete final answer. So if either of them is a negative, make sure you keep that negative with it. Okay? All right. So find the axis of symmetry for this graph. So I go -10, if you want to put parentheses you can, over 2 times -3. So that's -10 over -6 is 5 over 3. Okay? Do not leave the double negative. Okay, once you've found the axis of symmetry, whether it's by looking at a graph or averaging your zeros or using -b over 2a, then you can find the vertex. And you do that by plugging the x into your equation, and you'll get the corresponding y coordinate. So you just plug it in. Let's do some examples. Okay, so now we're going to find the axis of symmetry and the vertex. These are problems from your journal. So we're going to do the first two together. So we have negative b over 2a, and I always write the formula so I don't forget to put things in correctly. So I get negative, then I put my negative 10 over 2 times my coefficient of 1. So I get positive 10 over 2 equals 5. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 5. Remember, we always want to write it as a line. And my vertex, I'm half done because the axis of symmetry is my x and my vertex. Okay? So now I'm going to plug that in. You can use f of x or you can use y. I like to remind myself that I'm solving for y. So I put a y. And I go 5 squared minus 10 times 5 plus 2. That's 25 minus 50 plus 2. 25 minus 50 is negative 25 plus 2 is negative 23. And that is my vertex. Okay, over here, we're going to use negative b over 2a again to find our axis of symmetry. So we get negative 16 over 2 times negative 4 is negative 16 over negative 8 equals 2. So I know that my axis of symmetry is x equals 2, and I know that my vertex is 2 something, okay, because that is the x of my vertex. So I'm going to plug in to find y. Y equals negative 4 times 2 squared plus 16 times 2 is 2 squared is 4, so this is negative 16 plus 32 is 16, and there is my vertex. Okay, so you try the next two, and you can pause it if you want and see how you do. Or you could just write them down and try them later. And there are your answers. Okay, remember that a y-intercept is the y-coordinate of the point where the graph intersects the y-axis. The x-coordinate of this point is always 0. For a quadratic function written in the form like this, if x equals 0, then this disappears, and you're left with c. So the y-intercept of a quadratic function is c. All right. Okay. Okay. So this is just showing you that if you have this equation, this is your y-intercept. If you have this equation, this is your y-intercept. If you have this equation, remember this, and this is your y-intercept. Okay. Earlier you found the axis of symmetry and the vertex of a parabola. You can use these characteristics, the x, the y-intercept, and symmetry to graph a quadratic function. Knowing that it's symmetrical, every point that is the same, has the same y, will be the same distance from your axis of symmetry. Okay? So let's graph. Okay, so here's the first step. Our first point is going to be our vertex. So we want to find our axis of symmetry. So we're going to go negative 6 over 2 times 3 is 6 over 6 is 1. So we're going to know that that's true. Then we're going to plug in that to get our vertex. So we're going to go 3 times 1 squared is 3, minus 6 times 1 is minus 6, plus 1. And then we can find, so I've got the axis of symmetry. There it is graphed. And now we're going to find the vertex, which is negative 2. 3 minus 6 is negative 3, plus 1 is negative 2. So we put that as our first point in our t-chart. Okay, and then we're going to graph that point like that. Okay, the next step is to find the y-intercept, and that's pretty easy. We've already got our vertex, so our second point is going to be that y-intercept. And there it is graphed here on the graph in green. And then we're going to find what we call, what I like to call, the mirror point. In other words, if there's a point here, which is 1 away from our from our axis of symmetry, then there's a point over here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to graph that point and we're going to write it on our t-chart. So now we've got 3 points, but it's best to have 5, so we're going to keep going. The third step is to get another point. This time we're going to pick, you get to pick a y. So I picked x equals -1, and I plug that in and I solve for that y. Okay, so if I do that, wow, I get that point up there. But I know that there's another point over there that's going to be the same. So plug it in, so 3 times -1 squared is 1, plus 6, because 6 times negative is plus 6. So we get 3 plus 6 is 9, plus 1 is 10. That point is -1, 10. And so this point is going to be 2, 10. Okay, because they're the same distance from the axis of symmetry. So there's the first point. And now we're going to find the mirror point, which we just did. And so now we have graphed 5 points. And it's really difficult for me to show you how to put them together, but the main thing is make it smooth, do not make it pointy. Okay? All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about maximum and minimum values. So if your graph is a SAD graph, then it has a maximum because the vertex is at the very top. So we have a vertex of x, y. Our maximum is whatever that point is. Our minimum, if we have a vertex, is still the y. So the y value of our vertex is either the maximum or the minimum. You look at the graph to tell if you're going to have a maximum or minimum. If your a is less than 0, in other words, if you have a negative a x squared, you're going to have a SAD graph, which means you're going to have a maximum. If you have a positive a, or a happy graph, then you're going to have a minimum. And then you just look at the vertex, and the y is your maximum or your minimum. And it's just a number. You don't want to write y equals because it's not a line, it's a point. Okay, so identify the vertex. So the vertex here on this one is 1, 2, 3, -3, 2. So my axis of symmetry is x equals -3, and my minimum is 2. Okay, over here, my vertex is 2, 5. So my axis of symmetry, and they didn't ask for this, but it's always important to get the relationships, is x equals 2, and now we have a maximum, and my maximum is 5. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the height of a small rise in a roller coaster is modeled by this equation, which is a pretty intense equation, where x is the distance in feet from the supported pole at ground level. They want you to find the height of the rise. So they're trying to get you to find this distance, okay? Can't really show you, but this distance. I'm trying to highlight it there. Okay, the distance of the rise. So mathematically, what do they need you to find? I want you to stop and think about that. Okay, so they are asking you to find the maximum. So if you think about the graph, here's my roller coaster, and this is my maximum. And that's what they want you to find, the distance from the ground. Okay, so whatever we do here, this is the number that we're looking for. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to go -0.42 over 2 times -0.07, and that equals -0.42 over -0.14, which equals 3, which is nice. So that means my axis of symmetry is 3, okay? And now I'm going to plug that into this equation. So I'm going to get -0.07 times 3 squared is 9, plus 0.42 times 3. One of the most common mistakes people make is they square both or don't square one of them. So make sure this one is squared, the first one is squared, and this one is just the axis of symmetry. plus 6.37. Another common mistake is people forget the negative. So when I multiply this, I get negative 0.63 plus 1.26 plus 6.37, and I add those together and I get the height of the rise is 7 feet. So it's not as big of a roller coaster as it looks. Okay, so here is your problems. They'll be written out for you for the exit ticket, and these are for you to do on the video. So Edpuzzle will have them, and you get to answer the questions. Here's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5.